Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Snake Pit Podcast, your one and only stop for all things entertainment, all things homegrown. Coming to you out of Toledo, Ohio, I'm your host, Jake Pilewski. You can follow us at jakepilewski.com. That's Pilewski. The Snake Pit. I knew we would get off topic a little bit, but we're still on topic. But I know you have a few things you want to talk about too, and I have no problem making this a two-part kind of interview because I want to introduce more of these two-part kind of interviews with a lot of people on here because there are things that we need to talk about, that we have our background, we have to get to know you, but there are some things that somebody that's actually lived it and breathed it should actually talk about to hopefully educate folks out there in a completely different realm. So what do you... I mean, I can give the floor to you completely, you know?
Well, yeah, well, and I'd love to get your feedback on this because I know that, again, I'm going to be talking about a lot of education-specific stuff. But
well, I won't turn my mic off.
Sure, yeah, please don't. Because I can listen to myself, talk all day. I actually, it's funny, when you were talking about recording things on the hitting, the record play at the same time to record songs on cassettes. Yeah. I used to do that and make my own radio shows by myself and just be guests. I would be my own guest. I'd be interviewing myself in different voices. So if you do turn your microphone off, I'll probably keep going and we'll come down at 3:00 in the morning and I'll be like, all right, next on the show, me.
We'll tell everybody listening, we'll be like, so you remember that one part of the podcast?
yeah, that was just George talking to himself for 6.5 hours. But yeah, so something that I really think is important for people to know is some of the stuff that's happening in education right now. Because I think it's very easy for people to be critical of the career, like they are of any career. Every career has its stresses. You can say, oh, if you want an easy job, go work at McDonald's. I guarantee you McDonald's has these stresses that we don't even know about. Yeah. But I want people to understand that there's some stuff that's going on right now in education that we could fix, that we could make better, and some of the solutions that we have coming up the pipe are not going to be the solution. So to begin, we've got a new head of education in the nation, and she was appointed by Donald Trump, and her name is Betsy DeVos. I don't know if that name rings a bell. And you know what? To tell you the truth, it could be like DeVos, DEVOS. I'm so disinterested in getting to know her better beyond that the pronunciation could be off. But something that people are getting a bit upset about, and I've kind of made this metaphorical relation to how I feel about it, is that this woman has had no experience running a school or running a school district or being a superintendent, and she got appointed. And the comparison I made was imagining that you're on a plane, and the plane is the engines explode and backfire, and the thing's going to the ground, and the flight attendant comes out and pulls the microphone off. We need someone to run the plane. Who's gonna land this crashing plane? And this guy in the back, Steve, just raises his hand. He's like, give me the wheel, I'll do it. And there's other pilots on board who are like, planes don't have wheels. I don't know who this guy is. He's got no experience landing a plane, but
perhaps he played Star Fox.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he's like, give me a shot. He's like, kind of flipping through SkyMall, and the vote somehow comes to let this guy land the plane without looking at anyone else. It comes out 50-50, which is literally how it came out for this woman. Are we going to appoint her? It came out 50-50, and the tiebreaker was Pence. He was the one that got to choose. And so who's he going to side with? Obviously with his best friend being, buddies with this billionaire.
Or he looks like an asshole,
Right. And so she gets voted in. And I think the thing that she's really leaning on as her platform for how to fix it is school choice and competition, because there's this mindset that competition brings quality. If you're the only burger joint in town, you can serve burnt patties and flat soda all day long. But the second that the Big Kahuna Burger opens across the road and they're making good stuff, now you got to work up to the quality of the Big Kahuna Burger.
And there's some truth to that.
Some truth to
that. But here comes the ellipses.
So there's this incredible... Okay, so and a lot of the information that I'm going to give, because education is got a lot of state control to it, a lot of the things that I'm going to be saying are from the mindset of someone who works in California education. So if someone's listening to this and they say, no, that particular piece isn't true, it's possible that they live or work in a state outside of California. But
correct.
Every kid in the United States is worth a certain amount of money for attending a school. And it's literally to the point that if you go on a 2-week vacation, with your family in the middle of a school year, that school will not get 2 weeks worth of that kid's money. It's like a per diem. So every kid is worth this certain amount of money. And by attending this school, the school gets the money for this kid. And so her mindset is, if every kid is worth this amount of money, then why don't we give families the decision to take that money for themselves and to use it to pay either a private school tuition or to homeschool their kids and to use that money for homeschool costs, which I can tell you right off the bat, there's something, it's called House Bill 610 that's on the floor right now that is basically that exact scenario. And if you take a poor family who is having trouble getting their kids to go to school, and that you say, hey, you can send your kids to school, you can get your kids to school, or we'll give you $5,000 a piece in voucher for all your kids to teach them at home, that family is going to take the $20,000.
Hands down.
No doubt. They're going to take 4 vouchers worth and they're going to use it. It's a bad decision. And somehow they attached something to the bill to get rid of the nutritional requirements for school lunches, that they can't exceed a certain calorie count and they have to have like certain nutritional basics to them. Somehow they wrote that in at the bottom that's not important, and they're trying to undo that. Even though we are feeding our kids lunches.
Stop getting rid of recess.
Yeah. We don't want to do that. So the problem with that is to look at, if you give families of these $5,000 checks, and that's an estimate that I create based off states like I believe Maryland that have actually tried to do this voucher system before for the baseline most poor families. If you give them this $5,000 check and you say, hey, use this any way you want, you can use it to pay tuition at a private school. So first off, the average cost of a private school is $10,000 a year, which for a high school is $13,500. In addition to that, if you go to a private school, usually that private school is going to have an entrance exam. It's going to have, maybe you have to do an audition. Maybe like your parents have to agree to volunteer for a certain amount of hours. So the fact that these kids are going to get accepted into the private school alone, even if they have the money, they've got to be able to pass the exam. And in addition to that, like Jake, if you could name a private school in the Toledo area, if you could think of one.
I mean, all the Catholic ones for sure.
Okay, so there. So immediately, if we're taking federal monies and giving them to private religious institutions, it's arguable that that's a violation of church and state, right?
In a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat. And I know that some people would say, oh, that's fine if it was St. John's, but if it was an Islamic school that we wanted to give federal monies to Muslim families, right now with the kind of conditions in the United States, that alone would be a pretty
Jewish or Hindu. I mean, but especially Islamic. I mean, especially because considering Perrysburg has one of the most prominent mosque temples like anywhere around, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and so it could happen.
Yeah,
and another issue with the private schools alone is private schools, and I'll talk about charter schools here in a minute. I know you brought up charter schools; they're different, but private schools have the ability to modify graduation requirements.
Correct. Yes.
Like they could say you don't have to pass these courses; the public schools have to. You don't have to pass like a state exam to say you graduated from high school.
And correct me if I'm wrong. With public schools, is it state mandated where they have to actually approve everything with public schools as far as like curriculum and all that, or is that
you can choose? Like I know like the Common Core thing, and if you have any questions about Common Core, I know that's a big term that people throw around, and I don't know if they actually understand what it means.
Most don't. Again, it goes back to the social media keyboard.
I actually like Common Core. One of the Common Core questions that was on a state test in California 2 years ago was, imagine that there is this baker, and the baker has a box that he wants to put donuts in, and he's been using these boxes that have too much surface area of cardboard but has enough volume to fit the donuts. Give the dimensions of a box that has less surface area of cardboard so you can save money, but still has the volume to fit the donuts.
Yeah.
And even though kids understood that length times width was area, and you add those sides together to get the surface area, and length times width times height is volume, when they saw this question, they were like, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about.
Right.
And so if you can't apply what you're learning to real life scenarios, then why are we learning it? And that's what Common Core is, in my opinion.
And I'll gladly throw myself under the bus on this one. In a heartbeat, because the first time I heard Common Core, I heard like the concepts, and I'm like, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That you're going such a roundabout way, like this is stupid. How different is that than me taking a different approach to learning music, or somebody taking a different approach to learning how to cook?
Right.
Like, what's the difference?
And it's not that, you'll see people on social media will post something that they say like, this is Common Core. They're teaching kids how to, find common denominators this way. But the thing that's cool about Common Core is the first question on a lot of these tests will be, what's the answer? And then the second question will be, why? And so as long as the kids can defend how they got to the answer in a logical way.
And if there's more than one way, brilliant.
So they're not just teaching them a different way to do things. They're teaching them other ways to do things, which I really love.
For God's sake, we had proofs. Come on. We had to work backwards just to prove that the things that they taught us for years were right. And I'm like, why don't you ask the teachers?
I used to always just fill in the first and the last one. And that's the only thing I understand. Not that the sine angle
right.
thing or theorem or whatever. I would just fill in the first one and the last one because they were always the same. In the middle, I would just have the answer. And I'd fill it.
Yeah, I'm like, I know this is the answer because I paid attention for 7 years.
And so you would love Common Core because you can actually say, why does this angle work? You don't have to say, well, it's the side angle side theorem. It's
more open-ended.
It's more open-ended.
And it goes back to what we were talking earlier about how you can't test every single child the same exact way.
Right. And so
that is what it is.
And so if these private schools, they since they're allowed to have this certain amount of flexibility, like let's say that a kid goes through 3 years in a private school and then junior year they leave or they get kicked out and they go to a public school. If they stuck with the private school's requirements for graduation, they might not have taken certain tests and certain courses, and now they're behind. And also, if you give them the $5,000 to pay the tuition, which isn't enough anyways, and the families probably can't cover the difference, if you give them that money and they pay the private school, and halfway through they get kicked out or they choose to leave, they technically used their state money that they're worth for the year. So, and the private school's not going to refund it. So what do you do then?
Right.
And so already the private school thing is flawed, and so you start looking at charter schools. And it's important to remember that Betsy, she and I are now on a first name basis, let's pretend. But I can tell you that she's from Michigan. And it's important to know that so charter schools, and just to give this background, and if I'm over explaining something that people already understand, when I heard charter school, the first thing I thought of was charter as in like a fishing boat or like that you all contribute money to fund
charter
something.
One bank or something.
Right. But a charter school is actually, the noun is in like charter, like a petition.
Yeah.
And so charter schools start by basically, if a charter school comes to a school district and their petition is written correctly, which is a template, it's hard to screw up, and you write it correctly, the school has to accept the charter school. And if they don't, if the district has to accept. And if they don't, then the charter goes to the county. If the county says no, you go to the state. And again, if you wrote it correctly, you're going to get to open. The resistance from the local schools to let the charter schools open is that schools base their budgets years in advance based on the number of kids they anticipate to be attending by looking at the residents of the census or who lives in the area. And so if those kids decide half of them are going to go to this new charter school and they leave, then the public school that they would have attended based on their proximity to their neighborhood is now working with half the budget that they anticipated, arguably by like millions of dollars, with it being, these kids worth thousands of dollars apiece. And so that's tough for the schools. They don't want that competition. And so again, it comes back to that business model of, but competition is good. So if you look at the state of Michigan, this was back in 1993. There was this governor, John Engler, and he wanted charter schools in Michigan. So he wanted them so badly that he actually said, if you open a charter school, whether you're a university, private enterprise, whatever, if you open a charter school here, not only will we, embrace your charter school, we will let you have 3% of the money that comes into that school go into your pocket. And so all of these universities, these private organizations start jumping at the chance to make this money. There was even this guy who owned this huge series of charter schools. He bought buildings because charter schools have to buy their own school site. That's why you'll see charter schools in like old churches or strip malls. So this guy bought buildings.
So they were hipster way before anybody else was.
Yeah, before it was cool. And they so this guy bought buildings, then leased them to schools that he owned. So he was paying himself rent with tax dollars and then writing off the cost of buying the building by the fact that he's using it as a public service. And this guy's like making bank. And these schools, especially in Michigan, especially in Detroit, are doing terribly. I mean, these chicken hawks are flying in and they're offering kids, hey, if you enroll at this school, we'll enter you in a raffle for a bicycle or we'll give you an iPad. And all these people are preying on these poor kids. And as the kids are enrolling in the school, they're giving them like, great grades, even though the kids aren't demonstrating actual, intellectual understanding. They're giving them great grades, so the parents are going, oh, this is a great school. And people are shoving this money in their pockets, to the fact that 80% of charter schools in Michigan, where Betsy is from, 80% of charter schools in Michigan are for profit. Not nonprofit, for profit. So they're making money. And so when people say charter schools, school makes competition, yet school doesn't make competition to help kids. School makes competition to take money. And it should be known that I have spent a majority of my career in charter schools. And I do believe in school choice, and I do believe in charter schools. But to say that all charter schools, opening a bunch of competition is going to be good for everybody, there's a big opportunity to see collapse in your local school system,
right,
just from other systems working their way in to try to kind of like steal the enrollment and screw things up. And you'll see these online schools and these distance learning schools. The reason that those are so popular is because since you do have to pay everything out of pocket, the building, the lunches, the supplies, if you open a charter school that's distance learning, where the kids only have to come in, you schedule them for like an hour at a time, and the kids come in and meet with you, that you can get a smaller building and save the money and put still, that 3% plus the leftover in your pocket. And I did work in a school like that, work for kids that could only come one day a week because they were pregnant, parenting, or homeless, or they worked to help the family. And I loved the one that I worked for. I thought it was outstanding. The people that I worked for cared tremendously about these kids and really bent over backwards to help these kids and look out for them and mentor them. But they don't all do that. Not the for-profit ones, in my opinion. So again, it's this solution that's coming to the table right now. If this House Bill 610 happens to move forward, I'm really encouraging people to understand that this is not the solution. And I could give you some ideas of what I think would make things better, but it's not this.
I want to reiterate the fact that, okay, so like this, the Snake Pit podcast has never been a political thing. It has never been. It will not be. And this isn't really even. Like, this is people involved in the industry presenting facts. And boggles my mind.
Well, and the reason that I validated, when you and I talked about it, not that you were like, well, tell me why you get to be on my podcast, but the reason that I validated my presence to kind of the really cool podcast that you've created for Toledo is that when schools are in financial trouble, the very first thing that they cut as quote unquote extra is the arts.
And how is that extra? That's the problem.
There are kids who show up to school because of the arts. That's the reason that they're coming every day.
I did.
And you start to cut those things, and you can start cutting the reason that kids are coming to school. You want as many outlets for kids to demonstrate their creativity and their understanding and their passion as possible. And so that's a big reason that I wanted to come talk to you was to kind of inform everybody about some of this stuff that's important to me, but also to say that, like, you're right. The arts, it's not supposed to be you go English and math, you test those first, then history and science. And it doesn't, the arts is just kind of, those are electives. That's just
extras.
That's extra. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not because, even when you go, I think it's insane that you could even be looking at a football player. The fact that we can expel people for not coming to school. You've missed too many days of school. Now you're kicked out. But I understand the validation of if a football player. There's schools that have. And our school was one of them. If you drop below this GPA, you don't get to be a part of the football team anymore.
Right.
But if the reason that you were showing up to school was the football team, you that's why the coach, you need to go to these kids and you need to say, look, man, we're counting on you. We want you to be successful across the board because every athlete is not going to become a professional, which is why they're starting to adjust the orientation for these athletes of being like, let's choose realistic careers. Don't major in liberal arts. What do you want to do if this doesn't work out? Because statistically it won't. The fact that we're cutting kids' presence on football teams or in the arts because their grades aren't high enough, if that was the only reason you were showing up in the first place and they said, you dropped below the GPA, you needed to be on the football team, you can't be on the football team, some of those kids are going to go, all right, well, then I'm out.
I'm out completely.
And statistically, they've got a better chance, they've got a 50% chance of being on welfare now.
who's learning the trades right now? You know what I mean? Like vocational schools, like when you and I were in high school, like we looked at, and I'm going to be straight up honest, like people in general looked at, okay, if you go to Penna Vocational School, you go there because you couldn't cut the mustard in a
There was a word that people used for people that went there. Do you remember it?
I don't remember it.
I remember people calling, and I'm telling you.
Please say it. Please
that vocational school, by the way, Penna, that vocational school, I've worked in communities that would kill for that school because not every kid wants to go to college or wants to go to a career that requires a college degree. I heard people calling people that go to Penta pentards, which if you think of, I know people who went to Penna who learned how to be carpenters, contractors, electricians.
That was a piss off laugh.
Yeah,
by the way.
no,
Yeah.
I absolutely, I know it was. And not these kids. They have no debt. They went into careers that are amazing. I got one friend in general. I'm not going to say his name because I didn't ask permission to do so. But this kid now owns 2 houses and a cottage. He could buy a house. He could flip it. And turn it into a marketable real estate investment.
Right.
And this kid went to Penna because he decided this is what I want to do. I want to learn this trade. I'm passionate about this trade. And so yeah, I think the idea. I love the idea of people trying to acquire as much education as they can. But if people do want to go into something that doesn't require formalized, expensive private education, I strongly encourage people to do that. That does not make them a failure.
Find your passion, you know. If you are really good at, at something, or you find some interest, in welding, like, I found my interest in music not till I was 15, 16 years old, It's never too late for anything. You can find it at 23. You can find it at 32. It doesn't matter. It's never too late. That's the whole point of this entire podcast. But and I know that's a completely different conversation, but it goes back to education.
It's intelligence.
And it's intelligence. And it's education.
It's absolutely.
And I think in the next 10 years, vocational schools, all of a sudden, and I hope this is true because for the sake of surviving, because as much as it is important to have intellectual education, it is also very important to have an intellectual education in the form of trades. And I think in the next 10 to 15 years, it's going to become so prominent because we've been focusing so much on computer technology for so long.
Being a 0 and 1 society, like you said, there's something called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, or you could say STEAM, and that extra A standing for arts. United States students, especially United States female students, are not going into majors that fill that. They're getting filled by dominantly students from other countries, and they anticipate that there's going to be this incredible vacancy in those careers, to the fact that some districts are starting to consider allowing coding to fulfill a foreign language requirement. So although I 100% agree with you that vocational schools offer outlets for an intelligence that, in my opinion, is just as valid as the intelligence that students want to take advantage of with a formalized degree. Those careers are going to be vacant, and so it's really important that we're encouraging our kids, we're exposing them to that, and especially exposing young girls to the idea that you could absolutely go into a career in science, technology, engineering, art, or math if you chose to do so.
Now's the time.
Now's the time. The jobs will be there. I do have a couple things that I think we need to think about as a nation that I think will make things better.
Yes.
Because I always tell my kids, my kids being my students, if you come to me and you just say, I don't like this, what do you want me to do about it? What is your solution? So I don't want to be the typical researcher who comes to the page and says, this is wrong, this won't help, bye. I want to come up with some ideas.
Well, you've lived it, though.
Yeah, I've not to the degree that some of the colleagues I've worked with and incredibly respect, but again, I do want to say that I think correlating the neighborhoods that we grow up in, the property taxes that we pay to the quality of education that kids will receive, I think that needs to be restructured. And in order to do that, it'll be very tough for some people to give up some of the money that would be going to their local schools, to help kids that are in poorer communities, whether it was we averaged the property taxes across a county or whatever. It's at the very least, kids should be able to go to a school in a building that they're proud of. To go to a school with metal detectors and bars on the windows and spray paint on the walls. No one wants to be in an environment like that. And so I think we need to improve that right off the grip. Parents, like you said, the parental involvement is huge. If parents can't be involved for one reason or another, they don't speak the language, they don't have the time, parents at least need to encourage education, and teachers and parents need to work cooperatively to develop a partnership of showing that we have a mutual interest in our students, that we want these kids, we want what's best for these kids cooperatively. We're not working against each other. I'm not here to criticize your parenting or insult your kid. We're all here to try to turn this into the best citizen that we can. We got to work on our suspensions and our expulsions. In California alone, just a couple of years ago, they had to, there were so many expulsions for black male high school students. There were so many expulsions that they had to make expelling a kid for what was called defiance. It was coded as defiance, that a kid wasn't, he wasn't complying with what you asked them to do. And, my version of defiance could be that a kid stood up and threw a desk at me and said no, and then, punched the clock out. And the other one could say, I told him to take out a pencil. He said, I don't want to. So we can't suspend or expel kids at the drop of a hat. We've got to be encouraging them to be there. If a kid's not showing up to school, call their house, call their parents, show up at their house if you have to. Take a definitive, individualized interest in the kids that are considered to be at risk of dropping out, the kids that you've identified as being the ones that are probably heading for the door, either statistically or at your own observations that these kids are at risk. To expel for truancy, we already talked about that, is insane. That, this kid doesn't come to school enough, let's tell this kid not to come to school.
Yeah, if anything, figure out why the hell he ain't coming to school. And even if he has to repeat a semester or a year, let's make sure it happens versus just completely kicking him out, because what the hell, you're just giving up on him.
Or don't let him get a year behind.
Right.
50% of Black and Latino students don't finish their high school education on time. Half of them don't finish on time. They get a year. We can't let them get behind.
It makes it a lot easier when you give up on them.
Show an interest. Yeah, exactly. It makes it incredibly easier. Respect teachers. Show them. Teachers definitely need to, like we said, you can be this kind of teacher, you make the same. Teachers need to remember why they are there. They need to take that personal interest. They need to care. But we need to
feel the same way with musicians. This is the same thing,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Give them prestige.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're none of that merit-based, that some schools are starting to pay their teachers based on the results of how well their kids are learning. You do that, no one's going to want to work with the tough and underperforming kids.
Exactly.
Embrace bilingual education. I know everyone says this is America. If you don't speak English, you can get the hell out. Well, not everyone says that, but that is a mindset that exists.
Most of those people, I feel like they could get the hell out.
Right. I'm going to have to concur. I think it's great that we can teach things. It's not fair. Why can't we teach a kid that speaks Spanish that comes to this country? Why can't we give them the math exam in Spanish? If they can still get the right answer in math, it means they understand the math, they just don't understand the language. They don't have to pass the English class, maybe. You can give them some extra support there. But it's great, the idea that we could teach things bilingually. We will, whether we want to think of this as a nation, our students in California a couple of years ago was the first year that the kindergarten class was more Latinos than white. So we are going to make that shift in this country. We are going to start to transition. It's okay for us to teach some things in another language, and we should be teaching Spanish sooner. And make sure that our kids know the point. Let's make sure they know why they're going to school every day. If you don't know the point that you're doing something, you're not going to do it.
George Smith, anything else you got, baby?
It's been really good, man. I really appreciate you having me here and everything that you're doing for the city. And I love seeing, every time I come back to Toledo, I love seeing that
the Renaissance,
the young people, they're taking an interest. This city is going to turn into a place that people are really, really proud to be. And I love seeing that, because I love this city too. We're
that quiet Midwest gem that's just going to sneak up on everybody and roar, flick them in the back of the head.
That's right.
Right on. I don't know if I can even say this.
Right on the Jesse Spano?
Right on the Jesse Spano.
Okay. Okay. Well,
George Smith, ladies and gentlemen, he's
so good.
Comedian, musician, teacher, and they all kind of run together.
Bad driver.
Bad driver, right? You can follow us at jakepilewski.com. That's Pilewski. The Snake Man.